Lee is recognized. Clerk will read.
Lee Amendment number 1.
Lee
An
amendment.
amendment offered by Ms. Lee. At the end of the bill,
Considered read. The gentlewoman's recognized.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. First of all, let me thank our ranking member and our chairman for including language which I requested to accelerate the completion of a cybersecurity strategy, and also for the Customs and Border Control to submit a report on its allocation of overtime resources. So thank you both for including this in the bill. I am offering this amendment, but I will withdraw it. But I think we need to reflect upon what it would do and really look at our role in aiding and abetting this Muslim ban. My amendment would prohibit funds from being implemented, administering, or enforcing Executive Order 13780, which is known as the Muslim Ban 2.0. Signed into force on March 6, 2017, this executive order is better known as the Muslim Ban for replacing a broader ban designated in January 2017 by another executive order. As you may recall, this first ban created chaos at airports and kept thousands stranded as the Customs and Border Control and other law enforcement officers struggled to really interpret the broad guidelines. Once the administration realized their first Muslim ban would not stand up in court because of its unconstitutionality and hateful intent, quite frankly, they issued this retooled Muslim ban in March 2017. Now, this continues to significantly slash the number of refugees the United States will admit and continues a broad ban on visitors from 6 majority Muslim countries: Iran, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, Syria, and Yemen. And while the Supreme Court allowed partial enforcement of the ban just last month, our nation should be deeply concerned by the administration's interpretation that we are closing doors to Muslim refugees. And I'm concerned because I've heard from many, many constituents and others that they and their families abroad are really quite afraid to travel. It's unacceptable. That's why my amendment is so critical. It would prevent funds from being used to implement this very heartless executive order because it's just dangerous and it's un-American. This ban forced on refugees and loved ones, it does not make America any safer. It diverts resources away from the real threats, and it weakens our leadership on the world stage. Contrary to claims in this executive order, none of the 9/11 hijackers would have been affected by this ban. According to the Cato Institute, which is a conservative think tank, as you know, not a single person has been killed in the United States by a terrorist attack committed from the countries under this ban. More than 100 bipartisan national security experts argue that this ban endangers Americans more. The fact that the United States has enacted a Muslim ban is really a propaganda victory for extremist groups like ISIS, who are already using it as a recruiting tool. More importantly, it's a hateful, unjust ban, and it really does take a wrecking ball to the Statue of Liberty. Halting refugees and immigrants from 6 predominantly Muslim nations is thinly veiled prejudice and Islamophobia. This is not who we are as a nation. We're a nation of immigrants who have come together to form a more perfect union. Congress should not allow the president to turn us into a country that turns its back on refugees and discriminates against people based on their religion. And so, you know, and I know the argument that we're going to hear here, that the issue is being litigated in the courts, and the Congress shouldn't meddle. But I tell you one thing, we as appropriators and as Americans really have a duty as members of this committee to continue to do the work to reflect upon our American values, and that is to ban to use our resources to further address our national security in ways that are reflective of the American way.
Thank you, Ms. Lee. Chairman Carter.
I rise in opposition to this amendment. Provisions of the executive order protecting the nation from foreign terrorist entry into the United States are valid exercise of the President's authority under Section 212F of the Immigration and Nationality Act and of the President's inherent powers over foreign policy. The majority of the provisions were not challenged in court. Thus, this amendment is overly broad. Those who were challenged have been held to be within the President's authority or are still being litigated in front of the Supreme Court. For these reasons, I oppose this amendment and ask others to vote no. Yield back.
Thank you, Judge Carter. I think you're planning to withdraw the amendment. Anyone further on the amendment? Ms. Lee?
No, I do plan to withdraw the amendment.
Okay, thank you.
But I would just encourage members of this committee to really understand what is taking place in terms of these executive orders. And in the future, we need to debate this more fully in this committee in terms of what we want to allocate and appropriate our resources for in terms of our national.
Thank you for
I
withdrawing.
thank you
Thank
for
you
withdrawing.
for withdrawing the amendment. Further amendments, Mr.